After the confrontation and the revelation of his background, the tension in the neighborhood slowly began to ease. The police department had conducted internal reviews, and higher authorities had confirmed his identity as a retired Delta Force commander. The officers who had previously harassed the family were reprimanded, and formal apologies were issued. The father did not seek recognition or reward. His only concern had ever been the safety and peace of his family, yet the outcome brought a profound sense of relief, both for him and for those he protected. Life at home returned to a quieter rhythm, though the lessons of vigilance and preparedness remained. The children resumed their play with a renewed sense of security, and his spouse felt less tension, though the memories of fear lingered faintly. They had witnessed the quiet power of a man who had protected them with skill, patience, and calm authority. Their respect and trust deepened, as did their appreciation for the quiet strength that had always existed behind his smile. Neighbors who had once whispered assumptions about him began to see him in a new light. He was no longer just the overweight man who waved politely on the street. He was a protector, someone whose presence carried authority and skill, someone who had ensured the safety of his family against those who misunderstood and underestimated him. Rumors spread, but this time they were words of respect rather than judgment. People admired his quiet courage even if they could not fully understand it. Despite the easing tension, the father continued to maintain vigilance. Life could be unpredictable, and he knew that assumptions about ordinary people could lead to dangerous consequences. He refined home security, practiced situational awareness, and reinforced routines that kept the family safe. But he did so with subtlety, never allowing the children to feel fear, never letting his spouse sense anxiety. He balanced preparedness with normalcy, ensuring that the household remained a place of laughter, learning, and love. The family gradually returned to routines that had once felt threatened. School projects, family dinners, and weekend outings became the backdrop of their lives once more. The children played in the yard without hesitation, and his spouse found joy in the simple pleasures of home. Yet every smile, every laugh, every ordinary moment was underscored by the quiet assurance that their father, their protector, was always vigilant. His presence had become both shield and anchor, a constant reassurance that allowed them to feel safe even in a world that could be unpredictable. He also took time to reflect quietly on the events that had unfolded. The harassment by the police, the confrontation, and the eventual revelation of his past reminded him of the importance of observation, patience, and controlled action. He had faced far greater dangers in his military career, but this challenge had been deeply personal. Protecting the people he loved most in the world, while maintaining calm and preventing escalation, had tested him in new ways. And he had succeeded without unnecessary conflict, relying on skill, strategy, and love rather than aggression. The family bond strengthened through this experience. Shared moments of laughter, quiet evenings, and simple daily routines became more meaningful. They understood without words that their safety and happiness had been preserved through his vigilance. The father had taught them lessons in courage, calm, and resilience, not through lectures or fear, but through action, patience, and the quiet assurance that they were protected. These lessons, subtle yet powerful, became part of the family's shared understanding and values. As the weeks passed, the police presence diminished completely. The officers who had caused fear and tension now approached with caution and respect. Their underestimation had been corrected, and they now understood that appearances could be deceiving. The father's calm, measured, and highly skilled response had reshaped the way they viewed him and his family. They learned a lesson in humility, one that emphasized the importance of respect, observation, and awareness when dealing with others. The community gradually embraced the family with renewed warmth. Neighbors who had once questioned or doubted them now offered smiles, greetings, and gestures of friendship. The family, while grateful for the change, remained modest and focused on their private life. They had experienced fear, tension, and confrontation, but they had emerged stronger, more united, and more confident. The father's quiet leadership had guided them through the storm, ensuring that love and safety prevailed. Inside the home, evenings were filled with laughter, conversation, and reflection. The father spent time with each child, teaching them lessons not just about safety, but about integrity, responsibility, and resilience. He showed them that true strength was calm, thoughtful and protective. He taught them that courage was not always loud, that it could exist in quiet vigilance, and that love was often the most powerful motivator in life. His spouse observed and supported, grateful for the calm assurance and unwavering dedication that had safeguarded their family. The father also took moments to reflect on the broader implications of their experiences. He realized how easily assumptions could mislead, how perceptions based on appearance could be dangerous, and how important it was to remain vigilant without fear. These reflections strengthened his resolve to maintain both protection and normalcy, ensuring that the family could thrive even in a world that could sometimes be unfair or unpredictable. One weekend, the family took a walk in a nearby park, enjoying the freedom of open space and sunlight. The children ran ahead, laughing and playing while the father and spouse followed, sharing quiet smiles and soft conversation. It was a moment of normalcy, of peace and of connection, but underlying it was a quiet awareness, a recognition that vigilance and preparedness were ongoing responsibilities, and that true protection required balance, patience, and thoughtful action. Back at home, the father continued subtle preparations. He refined security measures, practiced situational awareness exercises, and reviewed potential scenarios without causing alarm. Every adjustment was made with care, every precaution balanced against the need to maintain a sense of normal life. He understood that protection was an ongoing effort, one that required diligence, intelligence, and discipline. Yet he also ensured that these measures remained invisible to the family, preserving the sense of safety and comfort that they deserved. As weeks became months, the family fully regained their sense of normal life. The children returned to school without fear, their laughter echoing through the house and yard. Their spouse embraced daily routines with renewed confidence, knowing that their home was a place of safety and love. The father continued to guide, protect, and teach, balancing vigilance with warmth, discipline with compassion, and preparation with joy. The father's presence had become a cornerstone of their lives. His quiet authority, skill, and calm strength shaped the family's sense of security and well-being. He had faced challenges that no one could have imagined, had protected his family against misunderstanding and threat, and had emerged without harm. The neighborhood, now aware of his past, approached with respect and caution, but the family no longer feared intrusion or harassment. Peace had been restored. In the quiet evenings, the father would sit with his family, watching the sunset, listening to laughter, and enjoying the simplicity of life. He knew that danger could exist anywhere, and that vigilance was a lifelong responsibility. But he also understood that love, trust, and careful protection created a foundation stronger than fear. His family thrived under his guidance, and the lessons of courage, calm, and resilience became part of their shared experience. The story of the family spread quietly through the neighborhood, not as a tale of conflict, but as a story of courage, preparation, and quiet strength. People who had once doubted or misunderstood them now admired their composure and resilience. The father, once underestimated, had demonstrated the depth of skill and vigilance that protected those he loved. His actions became a reminder that true heroes often appear ordinary, and that courage and strength are not always visible to the eye. As life continued, the family embraced peace, joy, and connection. They celebrated ordinary moments with extraordinary appreciation, knowing that safety and love were hard-won and deeply valued. The father remained ever watchful, ever calm, and ever devoted, a silent guardian whose quiet strength ensured that life continued in harmony and security. And in that quiet home, surrounded by laughter, love, and resilience, the family thrived. The outside world might never fully comprehend the depth of his skill, experience, and vigilance, but within those walls, trust, courage, and protection reigned. The father, the unassuming man who had been underestimated, remained their anchor, their shield, and their hero, always ready, always watchful, and always devoted to the ones he loved most. The tension in the neighborhood had reached a tipping point. The police had grown bolder, their visits more frequent, their assumptions more dangerous. They still believed the man was harmless, a heavy-set, ordinary father who could not possibly defend his family in any meaningful way. They were wrong, and that mistake was about to be exposed. One afternoon, the family was in the living room when the sound of sirens echoed down the street. The children froze, glancing toward the window, and his spouse instinctively moved closer to him. He remained calm, his mind analyzing every detail: the type of vehicles, the number of officers, the patterns of their approach. Every movement of the police became a puzzle he could solve, every sound a clue to their next action. The officers arrived at the door in greater numbers than ever before. One of them knocked forcefully, demanding entry. His spouse turned pale, holding the children close. He stepped forward, blocking the doorway with a calm presence that carried unspoken authority. "Please state your purpose clearly," he said, his voice steady. "We will cooperate if there is a legitimate reason." The officers hesitated. They were unprepared for his composure, his confidence, the quiet but undeniable strength in his presence. They assumed fear would dominate him, as it would most men in his position. But he was not most men. He had led missions in hostile territories, faced enemies trained to kill, and survived situations where the odds were against him. He knew patience, timing, and control were more powerful than force alone. The officer at the door raised his voice, insisting on entering. That was the moment the man had been prepared for. He moved calmly, smoothly, ensuring the officers could not cause harm while maintaining authority. With precise actions, he disarmed the nearest officer of his confidence, not through aggression, but through calculated control. The officers froze, stunned by the unexpected competence before them. Inside, his spouse and children watched silently. They were both frightened and amazed. They had always trusted him, but now they realized the depth of his skill and the seriousness of his preparedness. Every movement he made was deliberate, protective, and controlled. There was no chaos, no panic, only the quiet authority of someone who had faced real danger and understood how to neutralize it without unnecessary harm. The officers quickly backed away, confusion and embarrassment written across their faces. They had assumed an easy situation, an ordinary man who could be intimidated. Instead, they found someone trained, experienced, and ready for every possibility. For the first time, they realized their assumptions had been not only wrong but dangerous. After the confrontation, he spoke to the officers calmly. He made it clear that his actions were not motivated by anger or a desire for conflict, but solely by the need to protect his family. "I will not allow anyone to harm my family," he said simply. "I expect respect and caution. Misunderstandings can happen, but they cannot be ignored." His words carried weight, a quiet authority that left no room for argument. Word spread quickly in the neighborhood. People who had previously whispered assumptions about him now looked at him with a mix of awe and respect. He had always been kind, always approachable, but now they saw that kindness did not equal weakness. Behind the calm exterior was a man capable of extraordinary skill and unwavering protection. The police department faced scrutiny after the incident. Internal reviews began, and higher authorities were contacted to verify the man's background. He revealed quietly and without fanfare that he was a retired Delta Force commander. The revelation shocked the officers who had harassed his family. Their underestimation of him was complete, and the consequences of their ignorance had been made painfully clear. In the days that followed, the family's life slowly returned to a more peaceful rhythm. The police presence diminished, replaced by formal apologies and assurances. The father had not sought recognition or reward. His sole concern had always been the safety of his family. Yet the knowledge of his skill and background changed the way people approached them. Neighbors treated them with renewed respect, and even those who had once been skeptical now understood the quiet strength that protected the household. He continued to maintain vigilance. His family's safety was always his priority, and he understood that peace was only temporary if assumptions persisted. He refined his home security, improved routines, and continued to teach his children the principles of calmness, observation, and preparedness. These lessons were subtle but vital, ensuring that they understood resilience and courage in a world that could be unpredictable. Life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but with new boundaries. The family ventured outside, played in the yard, and visited friends, all under the quiet watchfulness of the father. His spouse and children felt safer, yet they were also beginning to comprehend the depth of the man they trusted completely. They had always known him as kind and protective, but now they understood the profound skill, experience, and vigilance behind his calm demeanor. Even in moments of laughter and play, he remained aware of his surroundings. Observation was second nature. Vigilance was instinct. The family adapted to this new balance, finding comfort in the quiet assurance of his presence. The children learned that courage was not always loud, that strength could be calm, and that protection could be both loving and strategic. The father's reputation subtly shifted in the neighborhood. No longer just the friendly, overweight man who waved to neighbors, he became someone whose presence commanded respect and whose calm authority was understood, even if not fully visible. People sensed that he was capable of extraordinary action. Though few could imagine the extent of his skill, he spent evenings reflecting quietly, reviewing every interaction, every pattern of behavior he had observed, and every preparation he had made. The lessons from his past, the missions, the dangers, the need for patience and precision, were now applied in everyday life. Protecting his family was no less critical than any operation he had led abroad. Every decision carried weight, every observation mattered, and every action was deliberate. The family's bond strengthened through these experiences. Shared meals, bedtime stories, and quiet moments in the garden became symbols of resilience and love. They knew even without words that the father's vigilance had kept them safe, that his calm presence was a shield against danger. The world outside might not understand, but inside the home, trust, courage, and protection defined their daily life. In this delicate balance, the father found purpose. He had faced countless dangers in his past, but none were as personal as protecting the people he loved most. Every day was a test of patience, strategy, and care, and he approached it with the same discipline he had always applied. His family's safety, their sense of security, and their happiness were now his mission, and he executed it with unwavering dedication. As the neighborhood continued its quiet rhythm, the family moved forward stronger and more united. The father's presence remained the constant anchor, his calm authority a source of reassurance. The police, once persistent and ignorant of the danger they underestimated, now approached with caution and respect. The world outside may have seen only ordinary life, but within the home, extraordinary skill and vigilance ensured that the family remained safe. And as the sun set each evening, casting warm light across the quiet streets, the father sat with his family, enjoying simple moments that had been hard-won. Laughter, conversation, and the comfort of togetherness were the true victories, symbols of safety preserved through patience, preparation, and unwavering protection. The neighborhood, oblivious to the depths of his past, saw only a peaceful family, but those within the home understood the quiet strength and vigilance that made every day possible. Days turned into weeks, and the tension surrounding the family continued to grow. The father remained vigilant, though outwardly life seemed calm. He went to work, helped his children with school projects, and spent evenings with his spouse, all while quietly observing the world around him. Every sound, every shadow, every movement outside their home was catalogued in his mind. It had become second nature, a quiet rhythm he could not ignore. The police harassment had become more frequent. They appeared at odd hours, sometimes claiming to check on noise complaints, other times citing minor violations. Each visit was an opportunity for him to assess their approach, their behavior, and their assumptions. He noticed small mistakes, officers talking among themselves instead of focusing on the task, miscommunications that revealed their lack of preparation, and, most importantly, their underestimation of him. They thought him harmless. That assumption, he knew, was dangerous for everyone involved. One afternoon, as the children played in the backyard, he noticed 2 police cars slowly circling the neighborhood. He walked outside casually, pretending to water the plants, his movements relaxed and ordinary. Inside, his mind analyzed every detail, the direction of the cars, the speed, the officer's body language. He noted that they were trying to intimidate the family, but he had learned long ago that intimidation only worked against those who allowed it. He remained calm, patient, and watchful, aware that a moment of carelessness could escalate into chaos. At home, he reassured his spouse and children as always. "Everything is okay," he said, his voice calm and steady. "We have each other, and that is what matters most." The children nodded, sensing the warmth and safety in his words. They did not know of the depth of preparation, and thought that went into ensuring their protection. They only knew that their father was strong, loving, and always there. That was enough to make them feel secure. As the week progressed, the police became bolder. One evening, a uniformed officer appeared at the door, insisting on a search for suspicious activity. The father greeted the officer politely and asked to see proper documentation. The officer hesitated, unprepared for resistance. The man's calm authority was palpable, and the officer stepped back slightly, uncertain. He realized that he was dealing with someone who did not fit the stereotype of weakness they had assumed. The father guided the conversation carefully, never raising his voice, never threatening. Yet every word communicated that he was fully aware of the risks and ready to act if necessary. Inside the house, his spouse and children watched silently, sensing the tension without fully understanding it. The father's presence was a shield. He positioned himself subtly, keeping the officer within view while ensuring the family remained safe. Every movement was deliberate, every glance calculated. He had faced real danger before, but this was different. It was personal. His family's safety was at stake, and he would not allow assumptions or incompetence to put them in harm's way. After a tense exchange, the officer left. The father watched until the vehicle was out of sight, then returned to his family, exhaling quietly. He knew this was only the beginning. The police did not yet realize they were dealing with someone trained at the highest level, someone who had survived situations far more dangerous than their harassment. But he did not seek confrontation. He sought protection. His goal was simple: ensure his family remained safe while keeping life as normal as possible. Over the next few days, he continued to observe. He noted changes in the officers' patterns, recognizing that they were becoming more frustrated and unpredictable. Their mistakes became more frequent as they assumed he would act like an ordinary man, unprepared and timid. He saw the danger in this arrogance, knowing that an unplanned confrontation could have serious consequences. Preparation and patience were his allies. He also spent time strengthening the home. Locks were checked, exits cleared, and alarms tested. Small adjustments in furniture and layout were made to create safer pathways. Every detail was considered, every contingency planned. The children and his spouse remained unaware of the full extent of these precautions, seeing only normal household activity. This balance between ordinary life and careful preparation became a rhythm, a way of protecting without creating fear. One evening, as he sat quietly in the living room, the children reading nearby, he reflected on his past, the missions he had led, the dangers he had faced, the lives he had saved. All of it had prepared him for this moment. Not for combat overseas, but for protecting the people he loved most in the world. It was a different kind of battlefield, one where patience, observation, and careful action mattered more than speed or force. He smiled faintly, realizing that all his training had led him here, to this quiet suburban home, defending his family in a way that the world would never understand. The police continued to make mistakes. One afternoon, an officer attempted to follow him as he took his children to school. The father noticed immediately, using his knowledge of observation and movement to ensure that the officer remained unnoticed. He guided the children along a route that kept them safe, never letting them sense the danger. Once they were out of sight, he relaxed slightly but remained alert. He knew that the officer's persistence could escalate, and he would need to be ready. Back at home, he created a plan for what to do if the situation worsened. It was not a plan for confrontation, it was a plan for protection. He reviewed every possible scenario, ensuring that every member of his family knew basic safety rules without revealing the depth of his preparations. He wanted them to remain calm, confident, and secure, even as the world outside threatened to intrude on their peaceful life. Despite the stress, moments of normalcy remained. Family dinners, bedtime stories, and laughter in the garden reminded him why he fought to maintain calm. His children's smiles, his spouse's quiet reassurance, and the warmth of home became his motivation. Everything he did was guided by the need to protect these moments, to shield them from fear and uncertainty. Then one night, the situation escalated further. A neighbor reported seeing suspicious activity near the house, and police arrived in greater numbers than before. The children were frightened, and his spouse looked to him for guidance. He remained calm, speaking softly and reassuringly. "We stay together," he said. "Everything is fine." Inside, he was analyzing, calculating, and preparing to act if necessary. He moved silently, positioning himself where he could intervene while keeping the family safe. The officers, unaware of who they were dealing with, approached confidently. They assumed that the man in front of them was ordinary, unarmed, and easily intimidated. They did not know that he had led men into battle, faced threats that most could not imagine, and survived through training, skill, and instinct. He allowed them to continue observing every step, noting weaknesses, and preparing for the moment when action might be required. As the night wore on, the officers eventually left without incident, but the father knew that their underestimation could lead to dangerous mistakes in the future. He decided to take further precautions, strengthening the home and preparing contingency plans. He could not allow fear to dominate life, but he could not ignore the risk either. Balance, observation, and preparation became the guiding principles of each day. The family adapted as best they could. The children learned to remain calm despite external tension, their father's presence giving them confidence. His spouse noticed the quiet discipline and care with which he handled every situation, realizing that his calm exterior hid a depth of strength unmatched by most. They did not need to understand the details. They only needed to trust him, and that trust was absolute. Through it all, the father continued his careful observation. Every officer, every vehicle, every interaction outside the home was noted and remembered. He knew that knowledge was power, and that understanding the patterns of those who threatened the family was the key to keeping them safe. He also knew that patience was essential. Acting too soon, too aggressively, could create unnecessary risk. He waited, always ready, always aware, and always protective. Life continued in this careful balance. Children played, meals were shared, and laughter echoed in the house. Yet beneath it all was vigilance, a quiet readiness that the family sensed but did not fully understand. The father had become both shield and guide, protecting through calm observation and preparation. Every day reinforced the lesson that courage was not loud or violent. It was quiet, steady, and deliberate, and it was always devoted to protecting the people who mattered most. And as the sun set each evening, the family gathered together, safe under his watchful eye. The outside world remained unaware of the depth of skill, training, and vigilance that shielded them. The father remained calm, loving, and patient, knowing that each day brought both challenges and opportunities to protect, teach, and guide. The quiet suburban home held a secret that no one could guess, a hidden strength that ensured the family's safety and peace. The next few days passed slowly but tensely for the family. Every knock at the door, every sound outside, every passing police car made the children glance nervously at their father. He, however, remained calm, masking the storm of awareness and strategy that ran through his mind. He knew the officer's behavior was not random. There was a pattern, even if it was hidden beneath incompetence and assumption. He studied it carefully, noting which times of day they came, which vehicles they used, and how they spoke to each other. He still went about life normally, doing his job and helping his children with schoolwork. But inside, he ran scenarios constantly, imagining ways the situation could escalate and planning responses for each possibility. He had learned long ago that panic led to mistakes, and mistakes could be deadly. His mind worked like a map, plotting paths, anticipating moves, and preparing contingencies. Yet outwardly, he was just a gentle, overweight man who smiled at neighbors and greeted everyone politely. No one guessed the depths of his training or the seriousness of his vigilance. One afternoon, as he walked his children to school, he noticed a familiar police car parked a few blocks away. He slowed his pace, casually observing the officers through the car windows. They were talking quietly, pointing occasionally toward his home. He kept his face neutral, his body relaxed, and continued walking as if he were unaware of their attention. But inside, he cataloged everything: their posture, their gestures, their apparent nervousness. Even small details mattered. Small mistakes could reveal how unprepared they were. Back home, his spouse tried to reassure herself that this would pass. She cooked dinner while glancing occasionally at the window, her nerves taut. The children played quietly, sensing the tension in the house without understanding its full cause. The father watched them closely, ensuring that they remained safe and that the outside threat did not touch their world. He spoke softly to them, distracting them with stories and jokes, but every word he said carried a quiet strength, a promise that nothing would harm them. That evening, a knock on the door shook the house. The children froze mid-play. His spouse approached cautiously, but he was already moving toward the door, calm but alert. He opened it to find two officers standing there looking serious. "Good evening," he said politely. "How can I help you?" They said they had received another complaint about suspicious activity in the neighborhood. He listened quietly, asking questions to understand the nature of the claim. But as they spoke, he noticed subtle errors in their behavior, gaps in their statements, nervous movements, a lack of coordination between them. It was clear they had no real evidence and no true understanding of the situation. They were relying on assumptions, and assumptions could be dangerous. He kept the conversation calm, guiding it without aggression. He didn't want his children to see fear or hostility. As the officers continued talking, he subtly positioned himself so that if anything went wrong, he could intervene safely. His mind ran through every possible outcome, each action measured and precise. He could disarm, restrain, or redirect if necessary, all while keeping his family out of harm's way. After several tense minutes, the officers left. The children relaxed slightly, but the father's eyes remained vigilant. He knew this was not the end. The officers' persistence indicated they were convinced the family was hiding something, though they were entirely mistaken. Their ignorance made them unpredictable, and unpredictability was a risk he could not ignore. Over the next few days, he intensified his observation. He monitored traffic, noting every police vehicle that drove past. He kept track of the officers who had come to the house and recorded patterns in their behavior. He prepared the family for emergencies in subtle ways, showing them safety routines, teaching them how to remain calm, and ensuring they knew that he would always protect them. It was a balance between normalcy and preparation, between everyday life and the hidden reality of threat management. One evening, as he helped his daughter with homework, a thought struck him. The police were not just making mistakes, they were being reckless. They were underestimating him and his family. That kind of recklessness could lead to real danger, not only for his family but for the officers themselves. He realized that waiting any longer might allow an accident to happen. Action needed to be considered carefully, but it could not be delayed indefinitely. He began preparing discreetly, not for attack but for protection. He reviewed every security measure in the house, ensuring that exits were clear, alarms functional, and everyone understood basic safety rules. He moved furniture slightly to create safer pathways, checked locks, and made small adjustments that no one would notice, but that could make a critical difference if a confrontation occurred. Every step was calculated, every adjustment deliberate. Meanwhile, the family tried to cling to routine. They played board games, watched television, and spent time in the garden. But the father remained quietly watchful. Even when laughing with his children, his mind analyzed every detail around him. The rustle of leaves, the creak of the gate, the passing headlights. It was instinct, second nature, and it gave him confidence that he could intervene instantly if necessary. One night, the sound of tires on gravel brought him to the window. A squad of police cars had parked near the house, more officers than ever before. The children stirred, sensing tension in the air. He moved silently, calmly instructing his spouse to stay with the children while he assessed the situation. Using knowledge gained from years in the field, he observed the officers' approach patterns, their spacing, and their readiness. He could see their assumptions. They believed they were approaching an unarmed, ordinary man. They had no idea what they were about to encounter. Despite the potential danger, he remained calm. Panic would only make mistakes more likely. He spoke quietly to his spouse and children, reassuring them while also signaling that they should be ready to follow his instructions if necessary. Every detail mattered: the distance between the officers, their line of sight, the angles of potential approach. He memorized it all, planning how to act with precision and efficiency without causing harm unnecessarily. The night dragged on. The officers eventually left without incident, but the message was clear. The situation was escalating, and ignorance on their part could have severe consequences. He decided to prepare more actively, but in a way that kept his family's daily life as normal as possible. He could not allow fear to dominate the household. Life had to continue, even under threat. In the following days, he began training his mind and body subtly at home, staying alert and ready. He exercised, not for show, but to ensure that he could react instantly if necessary. He reviewed strategies quietly, rehearsing responses to every possible scenario. He also spent time teaching his children resilience, calmness, and observation. He wanted them to understand that courage was not loud or aggressive. It was steady, thoughtful, and protective. The family grew closer during this time. Shared experiences, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding helped them endure the stress. The father's calm, composed nature became their anchor. His spouse began to notice not only his physical presence but the depth of his vigilance and care. She realized that the strength behind his quiet demeanor was unmatched, even if it remained hidden from the world. Even the neighbors began to notice subtle changes. The family seemed more careful, more aware, yet still warm and approachable. No one suspected the depth of skill and experience that lay beneath. The father had mastered the art of appearing ordinary while being anything but. He knew that perception was a powerful tool, and that it could protect his family as effectively as any physical preparation. By the end of the week, tension had settled slightly, but he knew the underlying threat remained. The police were persistent and foolishly confident, and this could lead to dangerous mistakes. He continued to observe, plan, and prepare silently. He had no desire for conflict, only the determination to protect his family at all costs. Every action, every word, every smile was calculated to maintain peace while ensuring readiness. Life continued, but the shadow of vigilance was constant. The father, a man underestimated by the world for his size and quiet demeanor, had become a silent guardian. He had faced far greater dangers in the past, and yet this challenge, protecting his own family from those who misunderstood him, was perhaps more personal than any he had faced abroad. Each day he balanced normal life with readiness, love with strategy, and calm with the storm of awareness that only someone with his experience could truly manage. And in that quiet neighborhood, the family moved forward together. Laughter mixed with vigilance, love mixed with preparation, and the father's steady hand guided them through uncertainty. The world outside saw only normalcy, but behind closed doors a highly trained mind was always alert, always ready, and always devoted to protecting the ones who mattered most. It was early morning when the man woke up in his quiet suburban home. Sunlight seeped through the curtains, casting a soft glow across the living room where his family was beginning to stir. His children were still half asleep, rubbing their eyes and yawning, while his spouse quietly moved around the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Everything seemed ordinary, just another peaceful day in the neighborhood. To anyone looking from the outside, the family appeared normal, happy even. But life was never as simple as it seemed. He, the father and husband, was a large man. His size often caused people to underestimate him. Neighbors sometimes whispered, thinking he was slow or weak, never imagining the reality beneath his calm exterior. What they didn't know was that he had once been a Delta Force commander, trained to face the most dangerous situations in the world. He had served his country in ways most people could only imagine. He had made decisions under fire that saved lives, led missions in hostile territory, and faced enemies who wanted nothing more than to end him. Yet here he was, living a quiet life, raising his children and trying to enjoy the simple moments. For years, this life had been peaceful. He went to work, helped his kids with school, and spent evenings with his family. But recently, a shadow had begun to creep into their lives. Local police, acting on vague tips and small misunderstandings, had begun to target his family. It started subtly, with minor questions at traffic stops and occasional visits from officers asking routine questions. At first, he ignored it, believing it was just bureaucracy and chance. But over time, it became more intense. The visits became frequent, the questions sharper, the tone more threatening. His spouse grew anxious. She didn't understand why the police seemed to focus on their family. She tried to stay calm for the children, hiding her fear, but the tension in the house was growing. The children noticed too, asking innocent questions that revealed their worry. "Why do they keep looking at our house?" his daughter asked one morning, clutching her stuffed toy. He knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, and said softly, "Sometimes people see things they don't understand. We just stay calm, okay?" Inside, he was analyzing every risk, planning how to protect them without revealing the full truth of who he really was. One afternoon, the police arrived in numbers. It was an ordinary day. He had returned from work and was preparing dinner when they knocked on the door. The children peeked through the window, scared by the sight of officers standing in the driveway, their presence heavy and intimidating. He opened the door calmly, greeted the officers politely, and asked what the problem was. They claimed there had been a report of suspicious activity in the area, vague and unspecific. He answered their questions patiently, his eyes scanning the street, noting every vehicle, every movement, every potential threat. His heart remained steady, trained reflexes kicking in quietly, unseen. The officers seemed convinced they were dealing with an ordinary man, someone harmless. They didn't know that one false move could be disastrous for them. The man, sensing their assumptions, carefully guided the conversation to avoid escalation. He did not want his children to witness fear or violence. He simply wanted them safe. After several tense minutes, the officers left, but the message was clear. They would not stop. Their focus on his family had intensified, and the threat now felt personal. At night, he could not sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, listening to the quiet breathing of his spouse and children, thinking about what had begun as small incidents and had now become harassment. Memories of his service flooded back. The long nights in foreign deserts, the weight of responsibility for others' lives, the constant vigilance required to survive. He had faced real danger before, but the thought of someone threatening his family stirred a different kind of resolve. He was not going to allow anyone to hurt them. The next day, he decided to change how he approached the situation. He began observing the police subtly, noting their patterns, their weaknesses, the ways they communicated with each other. He remembered every training exercise, every tactical lesson, every strategy he had learned over decades. This knowledge was not for fighting strangers on the street. It was for protecting those he loved. He did not want conflict, but he would not be caught unprepared. Meanwhile, the community remained unaware of the man's past. They still saw him as the kind, overweight man who smiled at neighbors, waved to passers-by, and took his children to the park. Rumors about police visits spread quietly, but no one suspected that beneath the calm exterior was someone trained to confront the most dangerous threats imaginable. He used this to his advantage, masking awareness and strength with patience and kindness, waiting for the right moment to ensure his family's safety. One afternoon, the children were playing in the yard when a neighbor came over, concerned about the constant police presence. "I don't understand why they keep bothering you," the neighbor said. The man smiled, placing a hand on the neighbor's shoulder. "Sometimes people see things wrong or make mistakes," he replied softly. "We just keep living our lives and stay calm. Everything will work out." The neighbor nodded, but worry lingered in their eyes. The family tried to maintain normalcy. Breakfasts were cheerful. Evenings were filled with homework and laughter, and weekends were spent on small trips and outings. The man ensured that the children never saw fear in his eyes. He wanted them to grow up believing that problems could be solved without panic, that courage was calm, not reckless. Still, the pressure outside their home was growing. Each time a police car drove past or a uniformed officer stopped nearby, tension flared briefly. The children's laughter would stop, and he would quietly step in, reminding them of the simple truth. We take care of each other. That is what matters most. He also began speaking to friends discreetly, seeking advice without revealing the full truth of his past. He listened carefully, absorbed information, and planned. His mind, always sharp, worked like it had in dangerous war zones, anticipating outcomes, preparing for every possibility. Yet he did not let these thoughts interfere with the simple joys of life, helping with homework, cooking meals, or watching his spouse's smile. He balanced vigilance with normalcy, ensuring his family remained unaware of how seriously he took the threat. One evening, as he tucked his children into bed, he thought about what he had learned over the years in service. Discipline, patience, observation, and timing were more important than force. He applied these lessons not in battle but in life at home, quietly preparing for a confrontation he hoped never to face. As the night settled over the quiet street, he looked out the window, scanning shadows and movements. He smiled slightly, thinking, "They have no idea who I am, and that is exactly how it should be." Sleep eventually came, but vigilance remained. He knew the challenges ahead would test patience as much as strength. For now, he would continue living life as he always had, quietly, lovingly, and with calculated care. His family was his mission, and he would protect them at any cost. And somewhere beneath the calm, unassuming exterior, a mind trained in the highest levels of military strategy silently prepared for whatever came next. The morning sun would rise again, and life would go on as usual for the neighborhood. Children would play, neighbors would gossip, and the world would continue, unaware that one ordinary family harbored a man who had faced extraordinary danger and who now stood ready to face a new kind of threat. This was just the beginning. The calm before a storm, and the man knew that soon the world would witness a truth that no one could have guessed by looking at him.